Welcome to the Luke Lunchtime Takeaway. We're going through Luke's Gospel week by week, following Jesus on his journey to his cross and his resurrection. I'm going to start with an unusual question today. How are you with cherry cake? If there's a big loaf of cherry cake on the table and you take a slice, are you the kind of person like me who wants to come back to tidy up the loaf and just make sure that you get as much of the cherries as you can? Because when we come to Luke's Gospel, we can cherry pick the stories of Luke's Gospel and we just pick the ones that we like and leave the rest of the cake because it's too awkward and too difficult. And some of the parables of Jesus are a bit like that. The parable of the banquet that we were thinking about in church last Sunday. It's a wonderful parable of invitation and welcome for people who are lost and hopeless. And next Sunday, we're going to be looking at the parable of the lost sheep and the lost coin. And after that, the parable of the lost son, the prodigal son. And these are wonderful messages of God's grace. But the interesting thing is that here in Luke 14, sandwiched between some of those parables is a passage which is really quite one of those hard sayings of Jesus. Listen to these words carefully. Jesus says, "If anyone comes to me and does not hate his own father and mother, and wife and children, and brothers and sisters, yes, and even his own life, he cannot be my disciple." Now, what is Jesus saying here? This sounds really strange, doesn't it? Didn't Jesus tell us to love our enemies and do good to those that hate us? So why is he telling us to hate our parents and even hate your own wife and your own children? Well, he follows up with another statement in verse 27. "Whoever does not bear his own cross and come after me cannot be my disciple." If you trust in Jesus and you seek to follow him as one of his disciples, he must be your first loyalty. Your loyalty is to him. Jesus is the only human being who can claim the title Lord in our lives. And the problem for us is that if Jesus is going to be our Lord, if we put somebody else or some other priority in first place, they become an idol. They become something else as a rival to Jesus. And that might be something apparently innocent, like our commitment to our family, to our parents, or whoever. And that's why it's so important when a Christian gets married that they should marry another Christian, because they're not going to then have divided loyalties. Both husband and wife will want to be disciples of Jesus. The fact is, your family can get in the way of your faith. There can be huge pressure from your family to tone down your faith, to sort of whittle it away into something small and manageable that you can kind of park in a corner and it doesn't trouble anybody. And in the end, you have to conform to your family's expectations rather than the real claims of Jesus to be one of his disciples. And Jesus is saying, if there's something that comes between you and me, that person, that thing, that whole aspect of your life has to be sacrificed. Which one are you going to follow? Are you going to follow me, says Jesus, or is somebody else going to be Lord of your life? If we're Christians, we believe that Jesus died in our place at the cross, and therefore, just as he gave up his rights for us, we have to give up our own rights and surrender our lives to him. And the things that come between us and Jesus, we have to put them to one side and we have to follow him. Now, Jesus goes on to explain that by teaching us two particular parables. The first one is the parable of the builder. If you go to build a tower or build a large house or a bridge or something, you work out what you're going to do. You draw up your plans. You do all the quantity surveying and work out what you need. You work out how deep the foundations need to be and how strong the structure needs to be to stand up. And you count the cost, you count the materials required. If, on the other hand, you just say, right, we're going to build a tower here, and you start building, and then halfway up you realize the walls aren't strong enough, the foundations aren't big enough, it's going to be left there half built, and everybody's going to laugh at you and call it a folly. Somebody has said that any fool can start well. And it's true that it's not the starting that counts, is it? It's the finishing. It's getting to the end of the project and seeing it through. You can start to follow Jesus, but will you finish well? Will you and I be serious about following him for the whole of the rest of our lives? The real cost is much later on than those early enthusiastic days when we start. That's the first parable, the parable of the builder. The second parable is a parable about a king, and he has an army and a kingdom, and he hears that another king is marching to attack him, and he's got a large army. So the king counts his army. He wants to see how strong his army is. And does he have the strength to resist this army that is coming to attack him? And it's the question that every government has to calculate. When they face an enemy that is threatening them, when they face invasion, what do? Is it worth the bloodshed if they know from the start that their best efforts are going to fail? It might be better to surrender than to just have a huge, long and bloody battle. Now, here's the surprise. Why does Jesus teach that parable? It is to ask us the question, are you trying to be a Christian from a position of strength? Are you trying to follow Jesus but think you're still in control of your life? We have to surrender everything to Jesus, and we have to let him be our Lord. Some people say they believe in Jesus, they have faith in Jesus, but actually they spell that word faith as a four-letter word, and it's spelt S-A-F-E. They want to play it safe. I want to trust in Jesus, but I want to protect my rights. I want to be in control of my life. I'm really still in charge of my life. Whereas living by faith is actually spelt R-I-S-K. It is a risk to follow Jesus. You're not in control. You don't know what the direction of your life's going to be. You don't know what he's going to ask of you. You don't know where your life is going to go. But Jesus must be the Lord of our lives if we're going to follow him. Now, Jesus finishes this passage with a rather strange little postscript. Listen to these words in verse 34. He says, "Salt is good, but if salt has lost its taste, how shall its saltiness be restored?" In Jesus' days, salt was something not very pure. There was a lot of grit mixed in with it, and if salt very easily dissolves, so that the salt can dissolve away, and all you're left with is the muck and the grit. And Jesus said that Christians are to be the salt of the earth. We're the ones who are to be there preserving society and its moral values. But if our Christian faith is like salt that just loses its saltiness, the saltiness drains away, then we're not useful for anything, are we? If our Christian faith doesn't really mean anything. And so he's saying to us, you need to take time to sit down and count the cost, to work out what it means to follow Jesus. And then you must surrender your whole life to him, to serve him, to follow him, and to say, for the whole of your life, Jesus Christ is my Lord. Thank you for joining me today, and I'll look forward to seeing you next time.